You recognize that some of these things are actually abuses, and when
Edward Snowden, the contractor who worked for America's National Security Agency, is still holed up in Moscow waiting to see if he can one day get asylum in a Latin American state. The implications of his release of secrets rumbles on, and Germany is expressing concern over the ability of the NSA to spy on EU citizens. Angela Merkel, German Chancellor, wants an overhaul of EU privacy laws that can protect European citizens from alleged American snooping. With me is the Financial Times editor, Lionel Barber. Lionel, it's not really surprising that the Germans are reacting in this way, given the scale of the snooping, but it's doing some damage to the US-German relationship.
It's doing a lot of damage to the US-European relationship. I think I've just been in the United States, and I don't think it's possible to underestimate the worries about the concern to future intelligence sharing and about possible legislation which will cover American internet companies and or other matters which would undermine the current cooperative nature about intelligence sharing and the way the internet works.
Yeah, because on the one hand, what Angela Merkel is saying is, I want to have some data protection laws that are going to protect German citizens. She's making a big fuss about that, and she's in an election campaign. On the other hand, the Germans have profited enormously from US intelligence over counterterrorism in Europe and so on. That must be the case.
We know she's in the middle of an election campaign. She's ahead at the moment, but given the sensitivities, we have to recognize that the history of Germany in the 20th century, a Nazi state, also East Germany, formerly communist, had a ferocious secret police, collected data on every citizen in East Germany. They're going to be sensitive about snooping. On the other hand, the Americans have helped the Germans with intelligence regarding their rightist fascist groups, neo-Nazi groups in Germany. And also, the fact is that the way this works, as I understand it, the NSA is not just picking up on German telephone calls, it's packets of information and conversations between other people which happen to be using German networks.
So that's one thing, clearly, that the intelligence services in the US are clearly very unhappy at the way in which Merkel is kind of putting the spotlight on them. There's another issue as well, though, isn't there, which is that if you start getting all this data protection legislation in Europe, you're effectively going to balkanize the internet. You're effectively going to start creating walls around the EU, or possibly even countries themselves, which basically make it very difficult for traffic to pass across service. Now, that undermines the US model, the business model for a lot of these companies, but it also balkanizes the internet. It breaks it up. That can't be a good thing.
It is a big concern of companies like Facebook, Google, Apple, these big companies that have benefited enormously from their ability to use a worldwide internet, traffic interrupted, exactly. And what they're concerned about is measures either on a national basis or on an EU basis. And remember, the EU is considering, MEPs right now are considering revising the data protection laws which were created well before the internet began in the 1990s. That's the concern, that they will be discriminated against.
It is clearly a big concern. If you stand back and look at everything that's happened since Snowden released all this stuff several weeks ago, this is really, in many ways, the big consequence of the Snowden effect, isn't it? It's not so much what is the surveillance by security services over their own countries. It's much more how this is having this huge negative impact on US-EU relations and the shape of the internet in the future.
I think the way the Americans see it, and I had some conversations recently, is that they feel they lost the battle, the propaganda war, if you like, in the first week, because it was accusations of snooping, and that's very sensitive in the European sense. It wasn't clear. We didn't know about programs like PRISM, where information was clearly being gleaned, which the Americans strongly believe that PRISM, for example, has halted a substantial number of terrorism attacks in the United States. But these are processes, judicial processes in the States, that were not well explained, not well understood, and therefore the Americans are on the back foot.
Lionel, thank you. Thanks.